Now that we are opened up and have allowed the sun to shine within us, let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable to you, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. I invite you to turn within for a moment as we begin these precious moments of greatness together, as we tap into the consciousness of those pioneers that established the educational chain of spiritual growth, those pioneers and practitioners that birthed a consciousness of new thought and soul development. Realizing that we are here today as the offsprings of those three great pioneers, Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, and a Unity student of over 60 plus years ago, the Reverend Dr. Johnny Coleman. The Fillmore's dream of unity lives on. Dr. Coleman's dream of better living lives on. For we are the evidence that their dream continues. And just as the Spirit of God moved on their consciousness, it moves on the consciousness of those of us who have said yes. Yes to birthing powers of consciousness and becoming all that God created us to be, the very movement of God in action. We honor the consciousness of those who went before us, and we too open ourselves to the wisdom and infinite intelligence that knows all, sees all, and is all. We give you, Father, Mother God, the glory, the honor, the praise, henceforth, now, and forever. I let it be so, and so it is. Amen. Good morning. What an honor and a privilege it is to stand before you today as a channel of God, as we birth into our lives and into our world the powers of consciousness. I bring you greetings from the Universal Foundation for Better Living, Christ Universal Temple, and the Meditative Life Ministries. To my esteemed and cherished new friends, Chief Executive Officer Jim Blake, President and Chief Operating Officer Guy Swanson, Unity World Headquarters President Sandra Campbell, Director of Archives, the archivist, Mark Schreiber, Director of Operations, Jenny Kelliker. To my friend, Director of Outreach and Engagement at Unity World Headquarters, the Reverend Mark Fuss. And last but not least, Unity's Keeper of the Flame and the Meditative Life Ministries 2018 Meditation Facilitator, the Reverend Paulette Pipe. Will the Meditative Life Ministry participants stand and give a warm, loving round of applause, thanking each of these beloved and all who are here for welcoming us home. I am again the Reverend Shirley Lawson, staff minister at Christ Universal Temple and founder and spiritual director of the Meditative Life Ministries. I love our theme, birthing consciousness. I love it because it provides an opportunity for us to revisit our roots. I was here last week, invited to be a part of the Fillmore Festival, and the theme was Roots and Wings. And so this provides an opportunity for us to, again, revisit our roots and to take a look at what we believe, live what we believe, and share it with the world. By birthing consciousness, we become not only hearers of the truth, but doers of the truth. Last week, while I was surfing Unity's YouTube archives, I ran across Ben Jameson, the first speaker to kick off this powerful series of Birthing Consciousness. Do you remember that? I was especially moved by his opening comments about the series being a wonderful opportunity for all of you because you were going to have 8 different people to come before you talking about this exact same idea of birthing consciousness. And that the more you connect and engage over these 8 weeks, he says, the more you are going to be able to see how Spirit takes this one idea and diversifies it through each of these 8 different people. He said, you will get a new idea from each one of us as we go deeper and deeper into this idea of birthing consciousness, so that we can see how far the rabbit hole goes. Do y'all remember him saying that? I stopped there and purposefully didn't finish listening to Ben's lesson, and I told him that last week. So you might be asking the question, well, why did you stop listening to it, Shirley? You want to know why? Well, it wasn't because of lack of interest. It was because I wanted to hear what God had to say to me, what message God had to give to me to give to you. Now, when I go back home, I will listen to him and all of the others and just be in awe of how the one mind worked through each one of us. And so I'm excited to be your 4th presenter that will take this idea of birthing consciousness into deeper levels of enlightenment, and as we discover and rediscover the powers of consciousness. I would like to thank someone who didn't even know that the omniscient mind of God was using her to give me a book that would become the inspiration for today's message, Birthing the Powers of Consciousness, and that person is Lori Galt Dotson. Thank you for gifting me this book, New Thought for a New Millennium. This very gift is further proof of the omniscient mind of God that is all-knowing, that is even before I knew, God knew. Charles Fillmore asserted, man has for untold ages looked forward to a new millennium day. That day will always be in the future until we let go of our thought of the future. He said, the millennium day is now. It is established today, this hour. This speaks to the power of now. Our thoughts, feelings, words, actions, and reactions determine our future. What's in our consciousness today, right now, it's what's being birthed into the world today. Our tomorrows, your tomorrows, starts with today. Marianne Williamson wrote in her foreword to this book, those of us who perceive the world metaphysically view human consciousness as a divine vessel. God has given us freedom to think what we choose and the creative capacity to bring forth worlds accordingly. Did you hear that? What we think, we shall experience. And when we think with God, we employ our capacity to co-create heaven on earth. The powers of God are given to us to share with him and all creation. And our task is to learn those powers and express them diligently in our lives. The world now, more than ever, needs us to awaken, to rediscover, to call forth our God-given powers and birth them into our lives, our world, and into this planet. We are the harbingers of truth. Let us not be afraid to be the Christed ones. Let us not be afraid to be the Christ, to be that which God has called us to be, and allow our human consciousness to become the divine vessels of God. Because in reality of ourselves, we can do nothing anyway. It is the Father within. It is the Christ mind within. It is the mind of God within that does the work. Our world and our life would be so much better if we just tapped into the mind that is within our mind. I think it was Michael Bernard Beckwith who said, "Your life is a journey from unconsciousness to higher consciousness." Did you hear that? Your life is a journey from unconsciousness to higher consciousness. So this idea of birthing consciousness is a journey to awaken. It is a journey of evolving what has been involved. Let me talk about that a little bit. Let me just quote Fillmore. He says, "Evolution is the development achieved by man or humankind working under spiritual law. It is the result of the development of ideas in mind. What we are is the result of the evolution of our consciousness, and this consciousness is the result of seed ideas sown in mind. In the beginning," Fillmore says, "God implanted his perfect word, involved his seed word into each man. So evolution is the unfolding of consciousness of that which God involved in man in the beginning." Robert Brumet, in his book, Birthing a Greater Reality, A Guide to Conscious or for Conscious Evolution, he quoted Dr. Robert Ornstein, a noted psychologist, on the evolution of consciousness. And he states, "Our biological evolution is for all practical purposes at its end. There will be no further biological evolution without conscious evolution. We have to take command of our evolution now and begin a massive program for conscious changes in the way we think." Brumet asserts, "To effectively consider the evolution of consciousness, it must be seen as having a purpose, and that all of life and consciousness is being drawn into that purpose, being drawn into something beyond itself. And from that perspective, the purpose of evolution is for the absolute to unfold itself within the relative universe. Likewise," he says, "human history is seen as the unfolding of the absolute through the life consciousness of humanity. Humanity discovers its deepest nature through this unfolding process. And the end of this process is to fulfill the ultimate potential of human consciousness, to consciously merge its identity with the absolute, to recognize that humanity itself is a conscious expression of the absolute." Are you ready to take that journey? Are you ready to take that journey? Maybe some, but I think by the end of you being here, you're ready. So this book, The 12 Powers, of humanity as expressed by Charles Fillmore. Mary Ann Williamson writes the foreword, and she invites us to go deeper to uncover these powers within ourselves. She says, these powers of consciousness are greater than the powers of technology, science, business, government, economics, or any other worldly expression. Did you all hear that? She says, these powers of consciousness are greater than the powers of technology, science, business, government, economics, or any other worldly expression. That whatever power these worldly activities seem to possess, they derive from the powers of consciousness. What we are learning anew at this critical moment in world history is that compared to the power of God, the power of the world is no power at all. Wow. Greater is that is within us than that is in the world. In other words, there is but one power, one presence, one origin of life, God, the good, the omnipotent. The Dalai Lama takes it even a little deeper. He says, all phenomena are empty because of being dependent. They are what we call in Buddhist philosophy dependent arisings. These are dependently established. There is nothing that is established independently. Do I need to say that again? All phenomena are empty. This is the Dalai Lama. Because of being dependent. There are what we call in Buddhist philosophy dependent arisings. Things are dependently established. There is nothing that is established independently. Hence, all creation emanates out of the God consciousness. Everything that exists or ever will exist has been pressed out of the body of God, which is the very substance of God. That is the underlying reality of all things. The very substance of God, it pervades all things, it inspires all things, and it is the living energy out of which everything is made. So what is consciousness? Charles says, the sense of awareness of knowing. Consciousness is a term meant to indicate awareness. It includes an awareness of the self, an awareness of our bodily sensations, our thoughts, feelings, words, actions, and reactions. And what we've been learning this weekend, mindfulness matters. Fillmore further states that consciousness is the sum total of all ideas accumulated in and affecting one's present being. It includes all that we are aware of in spirit, soul, body. The ideas that are held in mind are the basis for consciousness. So the question is then, what ideas are you holding in mind? Are you holding God ideas such as life, love, wisdom, power, substance, joy, and so forth? Or are you holding thoughts of lack, limitation, envy, hate, all those things? And I know that nobody here is. Writer Emmett Fox, one of the most notable New Thought leaders, had a profound respect and high regard for Unity headquarters. And it is recorded that during his visit here in 1936, he spoke to the workers on the topic, Life is Consciousness. Fox said, I think it is well that we remind ourselves what it is that we really believe and have. The answer is that we have the key to life, and that key is that life is a state of consciousness. Consciousness explains our problems, it explains the seeming difficulties we have, and it explains our triumphs in life. They all boil down to one thing and one thing only. Life is a state of consciousness that is the beginning and the end. He says, unless you change your state of consciousness, nothing else will change. Consciousness is what I am. Consciousness is what we are. I want you to repeat after me this affirmation. Consciousness is what I am.
Consciousness is what I am.
And I am the consciousness of God. Look at your neighbor and tell them, consciousness is what I am. And I am the consciousness of God. Consciousness is what you are. And you are the consciousness of God. In preparation for this lesson, I immediately went again to the revealing word. My revealing word goes back to probably 30 years ago. It is so raggedy. But I love it. I did buy a new one though. So I wanted to see what Fillmore had to say about this word consciousness. And I found it very interesting that he lists what I call 12 different states of consciousness. So if you want to know what they are, I encourage you to go to the Revealing Word and read pages 22 through 23. As I began to read them, it got me to thinking just how important it is for us to reflect on and examine our consciousness. Like that credit card commercial asks, what's in your wallet? What's in your consciousness? For that which is in your consciousness is what you are birthing. Now, among these 12 states of consciousness, Fillmore lists 3 states of consciousness that every new thoughter, every new thought community needs to stop giving birth to. 1, material consciousness. Fillmore says it is a state of mind based on a belief in the reality of materiality, or in things as they appear. He says it is the carnal mind, which is the human mind, expressing its unbelief in the omnipresence of God. You see, when you believe in what you see, you're going to get it twisted. Jesus said, you got to look beyond. And as metaphysicians, that means we must what? Look beyond that which appears. Stop believing in the reality. Remember, nothing is independent. It all depends on something else. The next one, he says, is negative consciousness. And that is a consciousness filled with ungodlike thoughts, such as fear, hate, greed, lust, resentment, and all those other things he named. When we talk about fear, Scripture tells us the thing that you fear will do what? It will come upon you. In my book, Golden Spiritual Nuggets, fear is failure to recognize your oneness with God. Whenever you're fearing something, you ain't thinking about your oneness with God, because if you knew that you were one with God, like that movie last night, you'd be walking that tightrope. Walking that tightrope. Fear is expecting the worst. anxiety about the future, and recognizing a power greater than God. Greater. Here's an affirmation. If fear thoughts ever come and those kind of things, something that you need to work with, like the movie last night, the guy worked with the things that was coming in his mind that he needed to get out of his mind so that he could do what he had to do. So here's an affirmation that you can write down. Greater is the power of God in me than you fill in the blank. So if it's health, greater is the power of God within me than this seeming whatever. Golden spiritual nugget number 55 says, don't let limited or negative thoughts guide your life. Rather, open your mind to the unlimited thoughts of God who knows the way you should go. And scripture tells us, for my thoughts are not your thoughts, nor your ways my ways, says the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. Fillmore's third one, sense consciousness. He says that is a mental state that believes in and acts through the senses. A mental state that believes in and acts through the senses. Now, God has given us these 5 senses for a purpose. So we can respect that. We want all our senses. But you don't want your life to be navigated by your 5 senses. Am I right? You don't want to be led by what you see, because as a metaphysician, you got to look beyond what you see. You don't want to be led by what you feel and all of that. So Gary Zukav says, we have some extrasensory senses that we need to tap into. So when it comes to spiritual growth and birthing consciousness, it is important to understand the importance of incorporating divine ideas into our consciousness. Now, this comes straight from Fillmore. He says it is important to begin to incorporate divine ideas into our consciousness, because what you incorporate into your consciousness, you become, and what you become in consciousness is what you give birth to. So let us cease from filling our consciousness with beliefs in materiality and begin to incorporate the divine ideas of God. Everything comes from an idea. There's nothing that, just look around this room. Is there anything in this room that did not come from an idea? Someone was open and receptive to receive the idea to bring it forth. And when you do that, you will be able to look beyond the appearances and see God, the good, in everything. I'm talking about the good, the bad, and even the indifferent. See, God has a master plan. And remember, as I spoke about earlier, we're all evolving in consciousness. So Johnny used to say, name it good. I remember she used to put up her hand and say, with any situation, this came to bless me. Put your hands up. Let's do that. This came to bless me. Whatever it is, put up your hand. This came to bless me. Let us cease filling our consciousness with negativity and begin to fill our consciousness with God thoughts, such as power and strength and love and generosity and joy and purity and optimism, all of that. Michael A. McCabe also wrote in the book, there are 12 powers to a new millennium. To understand the 12 powers, you have to know that they are 12 expressions of the one power, the Christ within each of us. The 12 powers are faith, love, strength, wisdom, power, imagination, understanding, will, order, zeal, renunciation, and life. We all know them, don't we? He says, what is meant by the Christ is the fully awakened human being. the same as the Buddha mind or the higher self, the indwelling Lord, Shiva, the Atman. It is the state of consciousness within us that is completely one with God. Jesus realized his true spiritual nature and became a fully awakened being, the Christ. Just as he discovered and birthed these 12 powers of consciousness, we too must do the same. Author Paul Hasselbeck wrote, "You have within you 12 incredible powers which have their own special abilities and can be developed and called upon to empower and transform your life. So power up. Awake thou that sleepeth. Call forth the 12 hidden powers and birth those powers into the world. Birth into the world of consciousness of faith. A faith that sees and shapes substance. A faith that is spiritual assurance that God is in control, no matter what it's looking like. Birth into consciousness, a consciousness of love, that is the great harmonizer and the healing energy that the world needs today. Begin to birth consciousness of strength, that is the pure energy of God that frees us from weakness and gives us the ability to accomplish God's plan. Birth into consciousness wisdom that will enable us to use good judgment and know that there's only one that is wise, and that is God. Birth into consciousness power, which gives us the ability to control our thoughts, our feelings, our words, our actions and reactions, and become the power of God in action. You want to birth into consciousness imagination, which is the eye of our consciousness. And it gives us the ability to, again, to see beyond what we see. Understanding, you want to birth that consciousness. You want to birth that kind of consciousness. That is our ability to know and comprehend the things of spirit. Will, that is our ability to be willing to do the will of God. Birth into the consciousness, birth order, which is our ability to keep God first and to let the mind of God order our steps. We want to birth into consciousness zeal, that is the motivator of our consciousness and our ability to keep on keeping on. We want to birth the consciousness of elimination, the power that gives us the ability to say no and to forgive and to release others and all that no longer serves us. And finally, we want to birth the consciousness of life, that life is eternal. We are living in one of the most exciting times in Earth's history. More and more of us than ever before are awakening to the truth and are assisting in the spiritual growth and energetic expansion of the entire civilization. Oh, I was listening. Where's the band at? Oh, okay. Good to be alive right now. Is that what it is? Good to be alive right now. Michael Meditative asks us to reflect deeply about humanity's present and recognize the seeds of our future that lie dormant within us. He says, may they germinate and grow one whole person at a time, a bright and prosperous future for all of our global family. New thought for a new millennium. The new millennium day is now. It is established today, this hour, and so it is.